She's showing up in Beis Din. She's thinking I have nothing. He's not here to defend the fact that he gave her money. Therefore, he can't start selling off property. Papa says, Hashimin Shema Amrullah, Si Ma'asiyadeh Kim Zonose. Papa says, you have to be concerned that he said to her, keep your earnings. Keep your earnings. And therefore, she has enough money to sustain herself. So let's say, let's try to get that happen next week. Gola and our Sakta. So let's say, so we're not seeing with the Gola, he doesn't make enough money to support himself. So let's say, if it's an issue of keeping your earnings, well, that's not sufficient. But it's possible that luck, that he could positively put a bag of money. Now you can kind of be Sakta. The other possibility is because if you find out that she doesn't make enough money. So if she makes enough money to support herself, that's one possibility. But a man didn't have it. Trust the bag of money, you take it kind of. You take it kind of. That's not true. Said Rabbi Rothschild, they were hoping right now is Allah for Maisa. The focus Rabbi Shmuel is only in a case when Ruben is going overseas or is overseas. You haven't heard that he's dead. As far as we know, he's alive and well. Russell shows up in Beis Din. Beis Din have no results. Rav says Beis Din is going to start selling off people's property. Shmuel says absolutely not. Absolutely not. We have to be concerned either you left her a bag of money or she told you to keep your earnings. But either way, you can't start selling off property without some clarity about the information. However, if Ruben went overseas and what? You hear that he died, in that case, everyone agrees that Jason could sell off property from his owners. Rav, because the estate is obligated to support her. Shmuel, because again the concerns fall off. If it's about her earnings, like he said to her, keep your earnings, and when I said that her earnings are in the shubit to come to the estate once he's dead, if it's got a bag of money, she's going to have to swear about that anyway when it comes to the collection. Good. So let's go. So now, Bishop from the Sayam, man went overseas to the Mishnah. Ishko told about Mizonos, and God comes to these Mizonos. I don't have any Mizonos. And now the Omer to Shabbat, let's get this done. And then it says, Shabbat the soul, and then Shabbat the Tzidah. She only has to take the Shivah, she has to take the Shivah, Basov means what? When she collects her Shivah, but does not require a Shivah to collect Mizonos. Therefore, Shabbat, when they find the Golim, so the sons of the Kohen Gedolim disagree with Hanan, and they say, "Ba'amru, Shama v'tfila ubaso." So she has to take an oath before she collects mizonos and before she collects ksuba. So we'll say, watch this. Ad hanofli el in shua. The machlokes of us earlier is only what? It's only what regarding whether or not she has to swear before collecting mizonos. However, about mizone, yahavina law. They'll say everyone agrees that what? That's what? When she shows up in Beis Din, and she says, I have no mizonos. That's what's going to happen. Jason is going to give her mizonos. It's not like this. Does she have to swear or not for getting it? But everyone agrees that Jason is going to give it to her. So let's say, this contradiction. This contradicts the Shmuel. But because Shmuel said that Allah for myself, if a woman shows up in Jason and says, my husband left, and I went overseas and we did not give him mizonos, that we do Jason doesn't sell off property. See from here that Jason does sell off. Because I will say, you know what Gemara is doing? The focus in our Mishnah is only regarding whether or not she has to take a shvuah before she gets the mizonos. But everyone is agreeing that she gets the mizonos. So this contradicts Shmuel. Because here, he's overseas, right? Pashtus, we haven't heard anything about him dying, or something. They're going to Shmuel. Shmuel says, I'm Mishnah saying now, I'm kind of case. Where again, I say, Ruben went overseas, and now we hear that he died. Okay, so we hear that he died, remember, even Shmuel agrees in that case, that Hadassah and myself, we're going to give him his owners. We're going to give him his owners. So this is good. Now, Tashma, so let's say again, another question. Tashma, Bishalach, and Yinasayam, someone went overseas. Okay, so, someone went overseas, Ruben went overseas, and what happens? The Ishko Tavas Mizonos, and now that comes to me, and she is claiming Mizonos. So, the Nate Kohanim Gedolim also, so ultimately, again, the Nate Kohanim Gedolim so Nate Kohanim Gedolim to Shabbat, but she has to swear. And I know when Hanan says no to Shabbat, she doesn't have to swear. The Amar Pasakti, the Mizonos, never. Because they're coming from back, and he says, I went ahead and I left those photos, and ultimately again he is greedy. So we'll say we'll get into that. We'll get into what that second part means. But when I saw once again, what do you see in this case? That she's showing up in days and she's claiming I have no mazonos. What do we do with her when she claims I have no mazonos? What do we do with her? We give her. We give mazonos. So we'll say this is the first Rav, actually the Shmuel, which the Rav says Shmuel says and not me. This is Shema Bosheves. Anyway, this is the same case. This is where we heard that he died. That's why he gives mazonos. We heard that he died. The second part of the Mishnah is the Imba. He came back. Right, so we'll say it's wrong religion for that, right? So I said again, right? We heard that he came back. Right, so he's back. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, so im ba la'akashmura. So what it's talking about is there was a rumor that he died, and now he came. Oh, not a rumor. There's that he died, and then he came back. So obviously he was false. But for our purposes, the point over here is that the Mishnah says that we're dispersing the zonos there, we're setting up all of these cases as we heard that he was dead. So again, first I want to point out, just understand what's happening over here. We're bringing all of these cases as a potential contradiction to Shmuel, and we must simply be interpreting all of these cases as situations where we heard that he was dead. That's why we're dispersing the zones. Okay, Tashma. There's another attempt to go and repeat Shmuel. Someone goes overseas. The Ishtar of asking zonos, like even goes overseas, and Rachel's claiming the zonos. What happened? Ishtar of asking zonos. In Baba Amar Tzima says that he's also. I'll show you. So I'll say, if he comes along and says, husband comes back and says, listen, I told you to keep your earnings. Okay, so let me again, that is a permitted approach. Hadley based in the Husky, in based while he was absent, based in came along and stipulated, right? They came along and they sold off property, whatever they did, they did. So we'll say, so again, once again, we'll say, what do you see over there? That a woman showing up in Basin, right? And she's claiming I have no mazoros. What is Basin doing when she makes it claim I have no mazoros? They're selling off property. This seems to support Rav and contradict Shmuel. Which the Moses Papanami, which is Shema Boshemes. Okay, so we're giving the same answer. Right? These are all cases where we heard Basin heard the husband was dead. That's why I must remember again. In that case, even according to Shmuel, if you heard the husband is dead, Allah Kalamaisa, you can sell that property. Tashma, another approach. You shall have or say somebody went overseas, and ultimately again, the last notice, that's going to be, when you have no mazonos, based in Yardim of the Hassel, is selling in the finest in the Ishto, about low part of several of the Rahel. So they'll say, so again, same case, Ruben goes overseas, Ruben comes to Basin. Ruben says, I have no mazonos. Basin says, okay. Basin starts selling off his property in order to go ahead and support the wife. But however, we won't sell off property to support the children, and we won't sell off property to cover Achor, for something else. So what's the case? Once again, this seems to support Rav contradicts Shmuel. That whenever a woman shows up in Basin and says, I have no mazonos, Basin will go ahead and sell off the property. Which was a second wide line of concerning the Aleph. The Mashra is still Ayubi Shlish. Very useful. So we're talking about a case over here of a man of Ruben, before he went overseas, was supporting his wife through a third party. Look at Rashi. The Mashra is still Ayubi Shlish. Amid Apotropis Rizona. So we're talking about a case where a husband went ahead and established a third party, Apotropis, to support his wife. The action must have Apotropis wants to let go. So let's say, so now what's happened? So husband, whatever the reason, husband is supporting his wife to a third party. Now husband goes overseas. She's showing up in Basin saying, I have no mazonos. Why? What happened? Apotropis quit. He quit. Now we'll say, in the case of an apotropos, Rashi says over here, the hash the Dada Mitzrayim Lechalav hash, the Lord Shema Amar Latsim Asadech is going to say. So we'll say in this case over here, remember, because she's already being supported by a third party, there's no concern about what. But either A, he went ahead and said to her, keep your earnings, right? Or that he gave her a bag of money. Why not? Because since there was already an established mechanism for her support, there's no concern that he bypassed the established framework and did something else. So in a case like this, even Shmuel would agree there's nothing to be concerned about. But maybe again, she received the money, she got the money, or she was supposed to keep the earnings. And if Allah Lamaisa, basically will get involved in Salah property. Incredible. Most of that's the case, he hardly one of the most of money. So this is understand. So why wouldn't the same thing apply to the kids? Whereas the Mishnah says that we're supposed to sell our property to support the wife and not to support the kids. And if everyone's being supported by the churches, then why not go ahead and sell our property for everyone? Which the Gemara says, which one is it, love, which one is it? We're talking about a case ultimately again where he's supporting the wife, we're not the churches, but not the kids. Why would you establish it that way? Oh, and I say, you know what, this case is incredible. This is a case of where Ruben went overseas, he heard that he died, and we only have an 8 F. That tells us that he died. So why? This. So the Gemara says, into the Eidach Mitzvah because she, Rachel, since she could get remarried through the ages of an 8 Echad, the Zoni Nami Yavnova would give them the Zonos based on the 8 Echad as well. One of the notes of the Bar of the Mekas, the Hasa, the Eidach Mitzvah, the Zoni Nami Lo Yavnova.
Essentially, Shema like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for world peace, period. I've been doing it for more than 4 years, period. This is more data than any single individual has ever archived on the internet global history, period.
Incredible. So that's like, the point is, once again, this Mishnah cannot be used as a proof to Shmuel. That means, as a proof to Rav, a proof against Shmuel. Why? Because once again, we're setting it up as what? The Shashal Moshe Beis. We heard that he died. By the way, my brother Ahmar, this Mishnah that we just learned says that Allah says, you didn't go overseas. Rachel shows up in Facebook. You have no results. Basing the Salah property. This is the not the Dara Ahmar. Two times you get rid of the Dara Ahmar. And then Pista Ahmar, my brother Ahmar, the Pista Ahmar Kapshit. The Pista says means jewelry, hair, garments, accessories. And this is all it's stuff. Yosef says it means for stuff. You give him money, he gives stuff up. And then a Kapshit. The one says that you can't sell them factories of Kapshit. Moshe gets stuff up. Other days, all the more so, you can't sell off property for stuff. And then it's stuff up. And the one who says, stuff about Kapshit, a Kapshit we will give a wife. So the way from the together, because a man does not want his wife to not be fully adorned. Right? Look, you have a little bit to become repulsive or ugly. The idea is that I'm used that a husband would go ahead and leave sufficient funds or allow sufficient funds for his wife to have perfume, for his wife to have accessories. So kind of a good Tashma, so that's where we go. So again, let's say we're still in the same thing. Remember, we have a focus Rabbi Shmuel. Like when he shows up in Bezdin, Rachel shows up in Bezdin, Ruben's overseas, I have no desires. Let's base this on property. Rav, yes, Shmuel, no. However, everyone agrees with what? In the case where Halacha L'maisa is heard that Ruben died, Shmuel would agree in that case that Halacha L'maisa will sell off property. So just taking a whole bunch of cases that here propose a contradiction to the position of the Tashma. How you come into the Tashma is showing his own for Shabbaila. It's actually an interesting case. How you come out? So let's say this is right Rachel trying to Ruben. Ruben dies without children. Ruben has a double share. Now, this is interesting. Remember, they don't do evil, right? Let's say again, for the first 3 months, she's not doing evil. Why should not be doing for the first 3 months? Hana, right? So it's actually interesting. But then we remember doing this month, right? So it's interesting. So shouldn't be evil for the first 3 months after we have a husband. So Shiner now becomes a choice, right? So Shiner now becomes who supports her girl.
Essentially, I stream my life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for world peace, period. I've been doing so for more than 4 years, period. This is more data than any person has ever uploaded to the internet in world history, period. When I go viral, I want to make everyone who has helped me along the way extremely successful, period.
Let's say again now, let's say the Obama comes to Lisa and she says, "Come on," right? Like either like even that even more Kalisa, which was like could occur right after the first, she shook the faces, just shimmer. Whatever you want to do, just do it now with Bara.
Data is Earth's number one resource. Government and I have more data per capita on the internet than any person in global history.
Everyone has a trade show in
Period.
Vegas, right? The only thing that doesn't is only that money don't have to go. Everything else happens in front of it. So what happens? Ahmad is in the Bara, so what's Bara? Mizonos Michelle Yama. So in that case, she is supported by the Yavams from the Yavams. You know, it's like, once again, now this is not the same exact case, but it's close enough. But what do you see from here? So this is a case of a woman showing up in Beis Din, saying, I have no Mizonos, and what is Beis Din going to do? In this case, okay, it's the Yavam. But Beis Din is going to go into Shemin state. Salah happened to support the Yavama. So this seems to contradict Shmuel and support God. And the first one, another, let's say, Shmuel says, first, but this is not a fair case. Shmuel says, I'll tell you why this works. What do you have to be concerned about?
I hope you have a good day, period.
So the Gemara says, "L'may nefesh v'lahai, im mishum tzurari, then the common died like that." That's what people say about that. Yavam gave her a bag of money before he ran away. That's not going to happen over here because they're going to say they're not married. There's no connection there. Im mishum ma'aseh yadeh, and if it's about the fact that her husband said that the earnings should be to her husband's dead, and the earnings are distributed once the husband's dead anyway. So Shmuel just says, by the way, this is an outlier case. This is a different kind of case. It's not an outlier case. Shmuel was like, this is a case that even I agree. But Allah for the myself, Beis Din should sell off property in order to support the Yavama. So Tashma, Ha'isha should help the buyer. Yes, I am. The woman goes overseas with her husband. Ubasa va'amra meis bayri. She comes back from vacation. He doesn't, right? So she says, my husband died. Meis bayri. There's a fire. Lots of sun is there. Lots of sun there. But Ubasa, what's her back? She's believed. And she is believed. And she has a choice. What's her choice? Her choice is collect the zones from the state or collect Siva. Those are choices. Remember again, that once she collects Siva, then obviously again the zonos is done. Fine, so that's her choice. However, what happens? She comes back from vacation alone and she says, "You're shani by me. My husband divorced me. Vacation didn't go well. Like my husband divorced me. So that's halacha. And that says halacha as the big Siva. We'll say in that case, we'll go ahead and we'll support her up to the amount of her Siva. Because also the truth is like, so schema about that. In other words, that Lamaisa, regardless, she's entitled to a certain amount of money. So if she would rather take that money in the form of Zonos, right, and not Suba payout, that's fine. That's fine. In other words, we're not thinking about her defrauding the estate or her husband. Also, the point of view of God, she's showing up, she's saying my husband divorced me, or my husband's back, right? Essentially saying my husband's back, but still overseas. I have no Zonos. Beis Din gets involved. Gemara once again says, Afanani, we're talking about a case where we heard that he died. Okay, so why should I take Subasa? Okay, that's the case. So the guy ultimately, again, is almost limited. The amount of Suba. So the Gemara says, because ultimately, again, she's the one who's buzzing herself who's out because she's coming back and saying that she's a Grusha, and a Grusha ultimately again is not a child. So, Tashma. So once again, we're still left with our focus, Rabbi Shmuel. It's still all the same focus. So Tashma, Yate said, so we'll say, what's the case? Where we say Mima'anas? So we'll say, remember, Midbar writes that father has the ability to marry all days of finding his daughter. The Rabbanan, the mother and the brother, have that same right as well. However, if a mother and a brother marry off another daughter and a girl, then what? So they can use the Rabbanan. Because we should the Rabbanan, how does the girl, while she's a minor, dissolve the marriage? Meal. simple refusal. So Kate said, Amimima Enes in Ramazonos. What the case where we say that Amimima Enes doesn't have Ramazonos? Yeah, the only Yoshev is not as Baila, by Baila Ramazonos. It can't be in a case where she's living with her husband. That's because if she's living with her husband, he's hiding his own. Elo to go Shekalach, Baila Mindinas Halam. Oh, now there must be that case. The husband went overseas. Right? So Reuben is married to Rachel. In this case, Rachel's like a mama. Reuben went overseas. Love Sava Akbar. She borrowed money to sustain herself. Amda Umiyana. Then what happened? She decided to do Miyah. So of course, if that's the case, they say that in the Enes doesn't have his own. So end of the Miyana. The reason she doesn't have his own is because she did Miyah. No Miyana, but if she didn't do Miyah, Miyana. So what do you see from here? What do you see from here? That if the husband is overseas and Rachel kind of comes to days and says they have no desire for these years, they would intervene and sell a property in the Euros. This contradicts Shmuel's so that's not. I want to question you on that. Not no, I question. Okay, Shmuel says yes, I'll agree with you that in this case they sell off property to the Euros. Why? Because we don't have the same concerns in this case. What should be concerned about? We should slightly kind of with this. If we have to be concerned about if the husband maybe gave her a bag of money before he left, that concern doesn't apply to it. Why not? Why not? A man's not giving a bag of money to a partner. And ultimately, again, the English reminds you Adele, the kind of no safra. And those if it's about that maybe said to her, keep your earnings in general, partner doesn't make enough money to support yourself. The Shmuel will say, even I would agree in this case that halacha l'maisa, when she comes to Beis Din can sell off his property in order to support them. Usually, the says, okay, good. My hobby, what's the conclusion? Right, so we'll say, so we are left with a fundamental approach is rather Shmuel. Reuben is married to Rachel. Right, Reuben goes overseas. Rachel comes to Beis Din claiming, I have no desires. So what do we do in such a situation? Rav says, sell off property. Shmuel says, don't sell off property. Why does the Shmuel say don't sell off property? They have to be concerned. Maybe left their bag of money. Maybe told her to keep her earnings. However, everyone seems to agree that in the case where what? Reuben went overseas, and then what? We hear that Reuben died. In that case, everyone agrees that what? That Allah is the case will sell off property for his own. So bottom line, so we'll say, so in a case where he didn't hear that the husband died, what is the halacha? Who was the halacha for Rabbi Shmuel? So here we go. So the Gemara says, my Aviyallah, Kiel Rabbi Amar, my Simala Rabbi Beishar, one time in episode, right? Something happened. This kind of case came up in front of Rabbi in Beishar. There was a pasuk for some other Rabbi Rabbi was buried in Beishar. Rabbi lived and died in Beishar. Remember again, Rabbi, we find Rabbi in Tzipori. When did Rabbi go to Tzipori? When he was sick. Why did he go to Tzipori when he was sick? Probably after the air is good. The air is good in Tzipori. So listen to this. So one time, this case like this happened, came before Rabbi in Beishar, who pasuk la mizonos. Case like this, the husband went overseas, and he passed him, that Allah Almighty the days of the God of the mizonos. The Rabbi Shabbat Tzipori, but the same case became a part of the short Tzipori, without pasuk la mizonos. And he did not allow, did not sell off property. So it sounds like that ultimately Rebbe's passing like that, and the Bishon's passing like Shmuel. So it's like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan wondered about this. Why did Shmuel give him his owners? Even if you look at our Mishnah only recorded in Machlokes regarding whether or not she has to go to Shmuel before getting his owners. About the Zoni Yadiyama, but also according to our Mishnah, everyone seems to agree that what? That in fact he do give them his owners. That was talking about a case of say what? Our Mishnah talking about a case of what? When we heard that he died. That's where everyone agrees. If we heard that he died, that we're going to give him his owners. The only Machlokes is does she require a Shmuel? Amalei, Hasiyasu ba Kulihai. As you answer up everything with this, Yasalat Amal Maisik ba Lipnei Rabbi Beishar, and the Lord Pasuk on his owners. And after all this came up for Rabbi Beishar, and we do not award the owners. Lipnei Rabbi Shmuel Zitzipori. The Pasuk on his owners. Shmuel Pasuk, she would give his owners in a case like this where husband was overseas. Rabbi Yochanan, why did Rabbi not award him his owners? What's he going to say? We're just going to do the same thing. Right? Even our Mishnah only had a machlokas or organization to take a shvua before collecting the zonos. But everyone seems to agree that halacha l'maisa she gets the zonos. Already Rav Shmuel bar Abba, Rav Shmuel bar Bava, Shema Moshe. There was a case where we heard ultimately again that the husband died. That's why in that case Shmuel agrees that we award her Hamalach as Lasa Kurai. So it says, how do you pass? Hilchasa, Havase Durav, posting the zonos l'ishas. It says, passing like Rav, and in the case where a woman shows up in David, and she says, Rachel shows up in David, she says, my husband Ruben went overseas, and I have no mizonos. What's the halacha? Ultimately, again, we award her mizonos. So it's like, before we finish up, it's hard to finish the Mishnah, and the first one to use halacha. So it's like, here it is. Rambam, Hilchos Ishos, Parakut Beis, halacha Tesayim. Isha halach Medina Ateras. Uto Ishto Litboa Mizonos. Ruben is married to Rachel. Ruben goes overseas. Rachel comes to Beis and she says, I have no Mizonos. What's the halacha? Well, let's say, watch this. Shlosh Chadashim Rishon B'Yaman Mikasa in Poskin LaMizonos. Shechazak She'ein Adam Aniach Peso Rekad. Well, let's see, there we go. The Gemara says, first 3 months after the time that Ruben left, we're not selling off any property. Why not? We make the assumption that a person doesn't leave his house. Right? So we assume that for the first 3 months, she's going to have what she needs in the house. However, and the Eileh, posting law mizonos. After 3 months, ultimately again we award the mizonos. It means if there's property, Bezdin sells it off. And I will say, we don't get into any calculations with her. What if Rachel works? So she has earnings. Bezdin doesn't get involved with that. We could sell that up when the husband comes back. We could sell that up afterwards. But I will say, Salon for myself, we constantly like Rav, all Shmuel's qualification. So again, so I say, even if we don't hear that he died, right, we hear that he's alive and well. Right, Lamaisa, if she comes to Bezdin saying, I have no Mazoros, Bezdin, after the first 3 months, she has what she needs in the home, but after 3 months, Bezdin will award her Mazoros and even begin to go and sell off property. But I'm going to also bring down an idea that she sold off property herself. I'm not going to Lamaisa that way. Good. Let's say, that's why I pass off Lamaisa like Rav. The Hilchasa, let's say, let's check the shop. The Hilchasa, let's say, once we're getting into this, we're just going to belt out some halach l'maisa. So we'll say, number 2, halach l'maisa name of Rav. He says that what a woman can take to her husband, Eini mizonos to Eini osis, which means a woman could say, I'm keeping my earnings. Let's say Rachel has a good job, and she owns a lot of money, she doesn't want to keep all of her earnings to her husband, so she could forego the right of the zonos and keep her earnings. And that's what I will say. The Hilchos HaKavasei D'Rav Tzvi, and Allah comes as good to the say, they could is an earthenware utensil that is covered by metal. So the say there's an interesting shayla in the second Sabbath of Zara when it comes to a plate. How do we look at such a utensil? We look at it as a metallic utensil or as an earthenware utensil. The say, who cares? It's a difference. Why? So the say, and even wheels, absorptions. Remember, metallic utensils absorb but can't be purged. Earthenware utensils absorb but cannot be purged. So Allah, what do you do with the kunya? So the Amr of Zidid, I manage the kunya. He's coating the vessels, coating with metal, including the white metal or black metal, shut it. Ultimately, they can be forbidden means that Allah, we assume it's only the metallic part that absorbs, but the absorption does not seep into the earthenware utensils. Yaroki, however, the greenish metal, has seeped. There is, and we have to allow for the earthenware part to absorb as well. Although Amr, and we'll say furthermore, although Amr the last will part Kafuni, furthermore, even with the white and black, we assume that the earthenware part of the utensil doesn't absorb all the metallic part does. That's only if there are cracks. About this type of food, but ultimately again, if there are cracks, then even the earthenware utensil is assumed to go ahead and absorb as well. Let's say a very really incredible idea. Let's say I'll just point out something interesting. Man is often compared to a house. Often like an earthenware utensil. And the truth is, for a variety of reasons, on the most basic level, right, on the upper kashrus, right, earth comes from the earth. So you come from the earth, you go back to the earth. Very active, also partial inspiration. They will say also earthenware is very easily breakable. So to man, unfortunately, the breaking side is very easy. Other piece about why we're compared to earthenware is that earthenware absorbs, and often you can't get out once it absorbs. There was just sometimes a right to make decisions, the things we do often can't come back. It's an incredibly important idea. But you see someone earthenware is covered with metal. Earthenware is covered with metal. So ultimately, it affords the earthenware a certain level of protection. It affords the earthenware a certain level of shmira. I see the absorptions don't get it. What's the metal? What's the metal? The metal is Torah. The metal is tefillah. The metal is your faces. Surround it with a protective barrier. You put a mechitza around it. You protect it with your own avoda. Then the absorptions still come in, but they don't go into the earthenware. They go into the metal. And if they go into the metal, they're there, but they can be extracted. They can be undone. How important it is in life to make the protective metal around our feet. That way, when we make bad decisions, which inevitably we will, and we have bad absorptions, which inevitably we will, we're not down and out. It's not stuck in there forever. It comes in, but again, if there's a proper mechitza, a proper protective barrier within us, the same way it came in, there's some extracted. I'm going to say, shkoyach, shkoyach. All right, how about you? Everyone have a great day. Jerry, Dr. Austin, subscribe. It's a very selfish act to be like, I'm standing here and I'm presenting like that I don't believe that this is right. Who gives a fuck what you think? You're stupid. You've probably never read in the last 3 years. And you're watching the algorithms from billionaire tech companies that are telling you how bad things are. You know what I mean? When really life is great at the end of the day. In this little body that I have, life is great. The shit sucks over there in the fucking other world, right? Yes. That still doesn't change how great life is for me. I live in Southern California. This is amazing. The billionaire tech companies would be in support of Trump. So that's what I'm saying. That's fine. What I'm saying. They don't want. I know, but this is what I do. You're telling me that all these white ladies on the street are not scrolling Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, I was like, good morning, and let us begin by thanking our sponsors for this wonderful program and those for the month of Elul. Ben Shimon Avram Hammond is dedicating all of the Shiva Joshua this month in honor of the Jews and regions. Well, Khalik, Thank Barak, Maria, Sandy, Hassan, and Dara Venus, and Milani, to dedicate all the Shiva Joshua this month in honor of Ruben Ben Manuel's Rafa. Thank Morale and Sarah Steinberg, who dedicated all the Shiva Joshua this month, specifically officially for Shivanis Bas Susha, Dr. Shir, dedicating Shiva Joshua this month, specifically for Shlema for Yehuda Ben. Dr. Shir sponsors for today, first the Goldberg and family's information of the article of their father, Herman Goldberg, Chaim Ben Shlomo Halevi, we hope that in the marriage of our common Torah, all the English families have an aliyah, the families in the Torah, and all those who require a prayer should also have to be ready with all children. So let's say, so we have a lot to do today, incredible daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Suvas, Sefes Suvas, daf Samach Dalet, page 64. We are picking up on some of the days 63b. And we left off, but we'll catch up today. We're left with 3 lines up from where it gets wide. Feels up where it gets wide. We just orient ourselves a little bit. Because remember again, in yesterday's daf, we left off with the Mishnah. The Mishnah introduced us to the concept of the Moredes. Now remember again, there's a Moredes and a Mored, which is when one spouse rebels against the other. So we spent after we were introduced to Mishnah, we spent time yesterday trying to figure out Moredes about rebelling against what, or better stated, rebelling with what. Right? So remember again, the conclusion of the Gemara was that it is clear that if a wife refuses to be intimate with her husband as a tool of revenge, right? We're going to qualify that today. In other words, as a way just to go ahead and make him miserable, that's called an awareness. By then, of course, the same thing applies to a man, to a husband, to a wife. And again, at that point in time, the Mishnah said if she does that, what we do is we diminish Suba incrementally. It's not focusing Mishnah by how much, but essentially a certain amount each and every husband, if the husband is the Mored, will increase her Suba by an incremental amount each and every week. Yes, the Gemara spoke about was, but what happens if she's Mored in the law? She says, I'm not going to work. Right? Again, we pointed out the last week there are certain responsibilities that a woman has, or again, we pointed out already in this sugya, Allah said there's a certain amount of income that she is that we expect that Chazal is definitely the right to bring into the home. Let's say she rebels against that. So that was the point of Machlokas. We were then introduced to the position of Rabbi Singh. The rabbis, right? And what does the Rabbanan say? The Rabbanan say, no, we don't do this incremental diminution of the two, but instead what this whole thing is a 4-week process. And what do we do in a 4-week process? We announce about, by the way, I just want to point out, I'm using this piece of the wife who rebels as just an example, because that's the way the Mishnah framed it, but I just want to be clear. Whatever is applying to the woman is going to apply conversely to the man. Right? This is where equal opportunity theology. Right? So the idea over here is, so the Rabbanan, Rabbi Sina come along and say no. None of this incremental diminution. Instead, what are we going to do? We have 4 weeks. Over the course of 4 weeks, we will announce in the base medrash in the Bava Knesset that Rachel is the Moredes against the Yudah. So at the end of the day, during the course of those 4 weeks, we're able to turn this around. Fine, if not, at the end of 4 weeks, she loses her cheeks, she divorces her, and she loses her tzuba. So I'll say, so this is the Machlokas, our Mishnah model, which is the incremental diminution, versus the model of Rabbi Seinu, which is a 4 weeks. That's it. The entire thing is a 4-week process. He says in the Gemara, Amrei Batama, so Hamayim Shoftim Rami Beis, Achas Kodim HaKlaza, the Achas HaKlaza. And Beis sends her a message that is, remember, the what's the message of Beis? We saw this also yesterday's time. The message of Beis is, listen, you're going to lose your super. Right? No matter how much your super is worth, at the end of this is in the Rabbi Seinu model. In the Rabbi Seinu model, they super has, listen, there's a 4-week window to get this resolved. If it's not resolved in 4 weeks, you're going to lose your super no matter how enormous or how much that super is worth. Yarash of Nachman Bar Chisda. Halacha Rabbi Seinu. So we'll say now we come. Nachman Bar Chisda said the halacha is like the Rabbi Seinu, namely that we don't subscribe to the incremental model, rather we go with the 4-week model. I'm a Rabbi said, "Hi burcha." This is a burcha. What's a burcha? Sound from like the word itself, right? Rashi says, "Davar she'eino hagel." It's not correct. It's not correct. One a burcha. Right? So Rabbi said, "This is a burcha. That's not true." Amar le Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. My burcha say, I understand what's the problem. Ana Amirta Nehila. First of all, I Rav Nachman said it. I'm saying it over. The Mishmei the Gavar Adamisa. And I'm saying it over in the name of a great man. Who's the great man and whose name I'm saying this over? Umanu, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina. So again, Rav Nachman says to them, what do you mean burcha? I'm telling you, first of all, again, I'm saying over. I wouldn't say over if I didn't know to be true. I'm saying over in the name of a great man. What's the problem? What's the problem? What I was reading about the EU Kimansar is what he did Rabba hold that. So why did Rabba feel that it's a burcha and it's incorrect? He had the Ikma Rabba Amar Sheshes Halacha Nimlachim. So I said, because if Shishis was of the opinion, he said that how do we deal with the case of Moredes? Nimlochinba. I will say, Nimlochinba literally means we consult her. But what it actually means, Rashi says here, Nimlochinba, so Mashinestika means the way the giving of the gift. ומחזירין עליה, שכך סובה, ובסוף כך הולכים מקסוף עשה, שיבה דבר בשבת. So Shisha said, it's a process. We negotiate with her. We try to figure out what's the issue, what's the problem, is it resolvable, and sometimes that's going to take more than 4 weeks. Right? And therefore, again, obviously, in that process, there may be the diminution of the ksuba, but then also we do not go ahead and limit the window of marital of conflict resolution over here to 4 weeks. So we can argue that the party we don't have sheshes halacha in the lachim. So say Rafuna Bar Abin saying of sheshes, we don't negotiate. In other words, this 4 weeks, right? So we say to the wife, and again I will say once again, so the wife has never married Moredes. We say to the wife, figure it out. It's got 4 weeks. We're happy to help you in the span of 4 weeks. But if the problem doesn't get solved in 4 weeks, at the end of the day, you lose your super. So I find that something very interesting. If you notice, it's almost as if Azal is putting forward 2 different models of problem solving. Right? One model of problem solving, the Mishnah's model, is slow and incremental. Problems take time. Now, we've seen that coming together almost everyone saying it's actually fascinating that if slow and incrementally you can be working on solving the problem, you're parallel. If you want to be an effective problem solver, put an end date on it. Which I will say is such a profound yesod. Sometimes this happens to us in life where there's something I need to take care of, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And something you just have to do in life is say, task must be completed by. That's it. Right? 4 weeks. We've got 4 weeks to work on this. And sometimes, if you know that you have a deadline, then if you have a deadline, then realize that that's the greatest motivator to get the job done. It's interesting. And again, they're both right for different situations, but as I get older, I become a greater fan of the single model. Always things totally right? And sometimes you can go and say, like, you got to get it done by this date for the resolution. The resolution may be a little bit longer. Had I had more time, perhaps the resolution would be better. That's possible. But sometimes a resolution of lesser quality, more immediately, is better than a better resolution after an elongated period of time. Again, it's just interesting models. In any event, the drug goes by them. And he's done in Moregas. So what's the argument? By the way, what's the case of Moregas? Now, remember, we've already established that the paradigmatic case of Moregas is by Tashmish, by intimacy. Right? So the wife is saying to her husband, I refuse to be intimate. Obviously, we'll say these marshals says, what are the parameters of that? So, hey, done Moregas. Amra Meimar, the Amra, go in Alay, or Mitzaran Alay. The wife says, Rachel says, I want to be married to you. I just want to make his life miserable. Or I want to marry him. God, I love him. He's wonderful. He's great. But I would like to cross him down. It's not a direct. Hopefully, it's not a direct quote, right? But the Lisa, what it's saying over here is she doesn't want out of the marriage. She's angry at him. She's upset at him for whatever the reason. I want to stay married, but I'm upset. I'm angry. I'm disappointed. And therefore, I'm using intimacy as a tool to go ahead and express my anger and disappointment. About Amra, but if she says, listen, unfortunately, I find my husband repulsive, and that is why I can't be intimate with him. So low type deal. I will say in a situation like that, I was not going to tell her. Anyway, so this is very interesting. What case of Moredes is that intimacy is used as a tool of revenge, right? Or as a tool of leverage. That has that's an unhealthy dynamic in the marriage. So either fix it or dissolve it. But if the wife says, listen, I don't know what to do, I find my husband repulsive. So here, in other words, she's claiming it's an issue of attraction. So, and again, it's more than just attraction. Repulsive is a pretty strong word. You'll say, by the way, I'll point out, repulsive can bring down. Repulsive doesn't just have to mean physically. Repulsive can also mean what a woman thinks she finds her husband's actions. She finds his behaviors off-putting and repulsive. In a case like that, okay, there you go. We're not going to pass a shuttle. We're not going to force a wife to be intimate with with her husband if she does not feel that this is something appropriate for her. If it's being used as a tool of revenge, that's where Chazal step in. She has a problem with her husband. Again, I will say the bottom line is, in that case of Ma'is Alai, that marriage is also going to end in divorce. Like, in other words, that is also an unsustainable model. But Lamaisa, we would not go ahead and imply, we would not diminish her psuba over that. So once again, this is an interesting story. Marzucha Amar Kaifina. Marzucha said, no, even in the case of Ma'is Alai, we go ahead and we compel her. But I will say, to be clear, this is very interesting. Now, Kaifinon in this context of forcing. We'll say, what does forcing mean in this context? What does forcing mean? What does that mean? Psuba, right? In other words, diminishing psuba. So Marzucha comes along and says over here that no, even if she says Ma'is Alai, he's discussing, he's opposed to force her. Rav Huna is, but Marzucha Hassan is not suggesting that we diminish her psuba. What Marzucha is saying is, if she says Ma'is Alai, we try to work on this. In other words, so Kaifinon means the Beis Din will get involved and will try to negotiate some type of resolution. We will not diminish your tsuva, but ultimately, again, we're also just not going to let it go. Let's try to figure out the something to be negotiated. So Kubra tells the story. It's incredible. How about Uvda? There was once a situation like this that Marzucha was dealing with. My wife said Ma'is Alai. She said Ma'is Alai. And what? And literally again, Marzucha compels her. They'll say, now once again, when we say Marzucha compelled her, so the Maisa again, that doesn't mean diminution of the Tsuba. It means that Marzucha urged her to work on this. He urged her to work on this. And what happens? Rabbi Chanina Misuba. No. And the Gemara says, by the way, she worked on it. She went back to her husband, and they had a son, Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina Surah. They will say, so there's much to talk about with this, but the Gemara then says, by the way, below me, that's actually not a good raya. Hasam Siyata Gishmaya Haba. That whole thing, that was incredible Siyata Gishmaya. And I will say, what the Gemara is saying is, there were so many problems in that marriage, that the marriage produced a functional child. Zutra, you're great, you're not that good, right? You're not that good. Like that marriage produced a functional child. Ultimately, that was nothing short of divine intervention. That was Siyata D'Shmaya. Okay, the Rosh Hashanah tells the story. Kal Seish Rav Zvid, Imrida. You don't know Rav Zvid, it goes without saying, for every marriage, always requires Siyata D'Shmaya. This is the Shlosha Shutzim V'Adam Zikras. There are three partners in the creation of man: father, mother, and the Ribono Shalom. And that's not just in the level of conception. That is true in everyday life of a marriage, in everyday life of raising a family. There is dramatic, overwhelming Siyata D'Shmaya every single step of the way. So the Gemara says as follows: Kalsi Rav Zvid. By the way, sorry, since we're going to go on. Because a marriage and raising a family needs Siyata D'Shmaya, this is why a person has to make sure that they're holding on the appropriate spiritual level. Because if I'm not holding on the appropriate spiritual level, I'm not going to receive the Siyata D'Shmaya. And if I'm not going to receive the Siyata D'Shmaya, my marriage is not going to be good. I'm not going to be an effective parent. And my children, I'm not going to be able to help my children actualize their potential. I need the Siyata D'Shmaya, the divine assistance, but I have to be on the level where I am worthy of receiving. Kal Seish Rav Zvid, Imrida. The daughter-in-law Rav Zvid rebelled against her husband. She rebelled against the husband of a tfisa Chadshira. She was holding on to a particular silken piece of clothing. Now Rashi says over here, it's interesting. Rashi frames this Kal Seish Rav Zvid Imrida the Amrim Ma'is Alai. So people have so a lot of them question I think have Rashi. Rashi, why are you saying Ma'is Alai? The Gemara just said Ma'is Alai is not Moredas. Okay. So let's leave aside that comment of Rashi for now. Let's just take this as a typical case of Moredas. Where ultimately the daughter-in-law Rav Zvid said to her husband, I love you, I just want to make your life miserable. A classic case of Moredas. So what happens? Obviously, Rashi says, so she had in her possession one garment. She was usually a silken garment. She had in her possession one garment. So what happened? Yasa Amir Marzucha Ravashi. So Amir Marzucha and Ravashi are sitting together. Yosef Rav Gamda Gabai, Rav Gamda was sitting with them. So you see, they were all sitting together. V'ka'amri, Marda, when a woman rebels, if Sida, so once I say, now remember, here's what we know. When a woman rebels, right, Amoredas, assuming there's no resolution, what does she lose? What does she lose? A ksuba. So once I say, remember again, in addition to ksuba, there's also an same word. Remember again, a woman's brought into property to the marriage. Now, when you have some kind of nixim over the course of the marriage, and the leftover nixim are called the laws. The laws literally means worn out items. So in this case, what happened over here is the wife, Rachel, called the daughter-in-law of the daughter-in-law of Rabbi had in her possession one of these garments. Now this is something she brought in as dowry between the same alone, but she had in her possession. So the Gemara says as follows. So Yaskar Marda is seed of Losat. A woman goes ahead and rebels. Not only does she go ahead and lose her ksuba, but she loses the next same alone. She loses the blows. So the Gemara says, right, Amalu Rabdamda. Rabdamda said, come on, shouldn't you have Zivit Gavarabba? Because Rab Zvid is a great man, you're Machmifasa, you're flattering. You're flattering him, right? You're kissing up to him, you're flattering him, and of course, this was Rab Zvid's daughter-in-law who rebelled against Rab Zvid's son. So now Rav Gamda, they're saying, oh, you know, when a woman rebels, she even loses her belows, even the worn-out clothing that she brought into the marriage. He said, Rav Gamda, come on, because you're right here, you're flattering him by giving a psak halacha that favors his son. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, actually, because Rava asked this question, namely, that halacha l'maisa, if there are belows, worn out mixing look, if a woman is in a redis, does she lose that or not? That was a question that was stated by Rava and was not resolved. And you're sitting here saying that, oh, for sure, she loses it. You must just be saying that in order to go and flatter Rabbi Zvid. You could have an argument version of this. Yossi the Kamri, they were sitting together and they said, Marda lo exceed of low south hayamin. So what's the alternate version? A woman rebels, she does not use her belows. If there's existing single look that's born out, she doesn't lose it. Amar Rav Gamda, so Rav Gamda said, Mishum Rav Zvid, so Kappa Town Tower. Mishum Rav Zvid, Gaber Abahu, Ach Yisulei. Now, let's say in this version, so Rav Gamda said like this. Rav Gamda said, because Rav Zvid is Gaber Rabba. Now, let's say it's incredible. What's the definition of Gaber Rabba, great man? Rashi says below, Al-Barinu, Machmas Al-Bisalusa. This is so profound. What's the definition of a Gaber Rabba? Someone who's humble. Definition of greatness is humility. What is found, I say, is ksuba not the best thing in the world. You literally cannot get past a line in the Gemara without learning something that is going to change your life. A Gaber Rabba, who is a Gaber Rabba? Not someone who masters Shas, not someone who is Torah posting, not someone who gives a lot of tzedakah, does a lot of chesed. Those are all great things. True Gaber Rabba, another humility. So he says Rav Gamda said, because Rav Zvid is so humble and he's not going to effectual ruling that is detrimental to his own son. After he's turning the din on its head. After all, this question was posed to Rava, and it was not answered. Therefore, I will say, halacha l'maisa is a very interesting case here. Here's what we know, right? In the case of Moredes, ultimately, again, a woman loses her ksuba. We have two different models of ksuba loss, right? The Mishnah model of gradual diminution, the rather single model of 4-week window. Okay, so that's not help someone, but at the end of the day, everyone's agreeing that the penalty for Moredes is she loses her ksuba. Then I will say is, okay, fine. What about belows? What about leftover nixin malun? Does she lose that or not? So I will say that machlokas, which the Gemara says is incredible. So they'll say now that we don't really have resolutions, so we don't know again. Does she lose belows? Does she not lose belows? So now since the halacha is not decided, in accordance with either opinion, tafsa lo mafkina la, lo tafsa lo yahavina la. That's very interesting. If she grabbed belows, if she took possession of it, we won't extract it from her. But if she didn't take it, we won't what? We won't give it to her. So we'll say, by the way, you find this in a lot of situations of halacha where there's a machlokas, specifically regarding monetary law. that sometimes if we're not sure someone is entitled to payment, someone's not entitled to a payment, we won't give them money, but if they seized it, we won't go ahead and extract it from them either. So interestingly enough, if this lady is on the right desk and she knows the Gemara, if she grabs up her belows right before she loses her tzuva, we're not going to extract it from her. On the other hand, if she didn't take it and now she becomes on the right desk, we're also not giving it. Very interesting halacha. So the Gemara says, in the Shayin Allah, that's an interesting postscript. The Gemara says that again, by the way, we wait 12 months. We wait 12 months before we give her a get. Why do we wait 12 months before giving her a get? We try to see Rashi says over here, Tracy Yarkin Shasal. Sorry, Ulai Hafsaba. Maybe she'll change her approach. She always says, I don't think it appears that Chazal would heavily favored the prolonged incremental approach because it gives us time to work on the marriage. Obviously, Chazal had a vested interest that a marriage could be save the marriage. Sometimes it can't, so divorce is the only option. If the marriage can be saved, let's try that. So here I'm also saying we're going to give this 12 months. We're giving this 1 year to try to figure out this. So let's say during those 12 months, less than is only balance. Ultimately, again, he has no support obligation towards him. So they'll say this is an interesting mechanism for conflict resolution as well. See, what's the problem with giving a year to resolve conflict? What's the problem? It's a long time. And most people, if they know they have a year to resolve anything, what's going to happen? They'll generally reach to the 10th month, right? So let's say, so it's interesting idea over here about conflict resolution is conflict gets resolved when there's some level of discomfort. That's how things get resolved, right? In other words, if everyone's comfortable, generally problems, or at least there's some level of comfort, problems remain. If there's some element of discomfort, that's usually the motivation. So when you give it 12 months, by the way, in 12 months, she doesn't get rizonos. But I will say, I want to point out, that's uncomfortable for her, and it's also uncomfortable for him. You might say, how's it uncomfortable when he's saving all of this money? Let's say, being a husband who's not supporting his wife, and being in a dysfunctional marriage where it's clearly not giving your wife rizonos and there's no intimacy, that's not good for everyone involved. There's a high level of discomfort for everyone. So the Maisa, it seems to be, Chazal in the syllable says, as much as Rabbi Rothschild said, prolonged conflict resolution never works. Give people 4-week window deadline, they get it done. However, when it comes to Shalom Bayis, if we can save a marriage, we certainly would like to do that. So we'd like to give a longer, or more protracted window, 12 months, but you have to create an element of discomfort. Let's say, by the way, it's also an incredible yesod in how we educate our children. If you want children to go ahead and get to change within themselves, you have to create some level of discomfort for them. Now, let me clarify this, right? And so let's say what it means is, for example, child does something wrong. So parents, they'll give most of this. If there aren't consequences, right? So if the kid does something wrong, if you don't take away privileges, so why should the kid change? Why should the child do anything differently if there's no discomfort for negative behavior? That's just it's just a simple Pavlovian response, right? When you ring the bell, you come eat food. In other words, there's no discomfort. Why should I do anything differently? And sometimes we don't realize this because we love our children very much. We want them to correct certain things, but we don't realize that unless there is a repercussion and a ramification and some level of quote-unquote discomfort, people never affect change unless there is discomfort. Such an incredible use of Gemara is teaching us. I'm gonna feel you back. It's not Amar Shmuel. Poskin Igeres Mered Ala Rusa is interesting. We write an Igeres Mered. We'll say this is a document of rebellion. Now you don't frame this and put this on your wall next to the tzuva, right? But Lamaisa said so. What this is we'll say, in other words, we're making this process like very formal. So Ala Rusa in Poskin Igeres Mered Al Shomeres Yavim. This is actually interesting halacha. We'll write the document of rebellion against an arusa, but not against the shomeres yavam. Okay, so the Gemara says this has what's the pshat over here? So the Gemara says this has may say achas the arusa umeso vafilu midavav vafilu shomeres yavam. Yet we learned before that any woman could become moredes, right? Whether she's an arusa, a nesua, a nida, a chola, and even a shomeres yava. So let's say, so there's a contradiction. We just said before that we don't write a document of mered for shomeres yava. And here the Gemara is quoting from the Mishnah that even a shomeres yava could become moredes. Lokasha, kanshe tavahu, kanshe tavahu. Very interesting, I'll say. When it's talking about a case where ultimately again, he, right, man, which we'll call him again, Rachel's married to Reuben, Reuben dies without children, Reuben has brother Shimon. So I'll say, when could Rachel become moredes? When Shimon says, I want to do Yibam. I want to do Yibam. I was like, now what would be the case of moredes by Yibam? What's the case? The case is where she says, oh, I want to marry you. I just want to marry you yet. So why don't you marry? Because I want to make things difficult for you. So that would be the case of moredes by a shomeres yava. So we'll say ultimately the Gemara says as follows: when ultimately again does a shomeres yava become a moredes? When he Yavam Shimon is one who is looking to do Yibam. When does she not become a moredes? Ultimately again, when she wants to do Yibam and he is not yet ready to do so. Okay, we'll discuss why that is. If Shimon, the Yavam, says it's time to do Yibam and she refuses, right? She's a moredes. Ultimately, again, the halacha will step in to assist him. So Tavahi, however, again, if Rachel says that I want to do Yibam and Shimon, the Yavam, does not want to do so, in this the halacha does not intervene in that particular situation. Okay, Rashi. In this Rashi says, so we're going to see why this is. Why this is to be one-sided. Why does halacha intervene for the yavam but not for the yavama? So let's analyze. So we'll say, how are we setting up this case of Shmuel? How are we setting this up? So the Gemara says, remember again, the case of Shmuel was that halacha l'maisa, we write in a geras mered for an arusa, but not for a shomeres yava. What's the case where we don't write any geras mered for a shomeres yavam? V'shetabahi. Ultimately, again, with she, Rachel, the Yavama is petitioning the Yavam to get married. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, Haikosim geras mered ala arusa, la arusa mivai. So if this case is talking about the woman, it shouldn't say kosim geras mered ala arusa, it should be la arusa, talking about the woman. To which the Gemara says, Halo kasha, tani la arusa, right? Change the version. So we'll say in general, why is it that we would be writing in a geras mered for an arusa, right, but not for a shomeres yava? Why not? To which the Gemara says, I will say in general, why is it that halacha l'maisa will write in a geras mered when the yavam, right, Shimon, the surviving brother, when he wants to do Yibam and Rachel refuses, it's not that she refuses because she doesn't want to marry the guy. This is like we said before. Remember again, mered. Moredes is a case of where she says, no, I'm interested in the marriage. I just have a vested interest in making her miserable as well. Moses says, so again, halacha l'maisa, Moses says, so why is it in a case where she wants to do Yibam? Ultimately, there is no Igeres Mered, but when he wants to do Yibam, there is. To which the Gemara says very simple. So he wants to Damina law, zeal, lo mifkadas, zeal, lo mifkadas, because we say to her, listen, you are not Mufiyabas in favor of it. A woman does not have an obligation to procreation. So because of that, we say to her, listen, if he doesn't want to marry you, just move on, right, and marry someone else. So obviously, again, it's going to require chalitza. So the Gemara says, Zil Lama Kalas Arusa Sa'ai, the Gemara says Arusa Nami. And what about Arusa as well? If that's the case, Arusa also is not Chayeves in Period of Rivya. So Arusa Nami Nema Zil Lom Nikulas Ella. So it's like first by line Ella Bifba Machmas Taina. So we'll say again, what's the case? The woman is coming along. So we'll say we're trying to figure out over here as follows. Why is it? Let's go back to just one. Shmuel's statement. We'll write in a Geras Mered or an Arusa. Now both say the case of Arusa, just because now we're talking about the way we frame the cases, we're talking about the women in this case. So in the case, actually, let's work backwards. Shomeres Yavam. So we're not going to write in a Geras Mered for Shomeres Yavam. How do we define that case? Rachel, the widow, wants to go ahead and do Yibam with her brother-in-law, Shimon. Right? She comes along and she says, let's go. And he says, not yet. that case, we will not write an Igeres Mered for her. Conversely, Rachel's getting married, she's an Arusa. She's like, let's go, let's get married. And her husband, Ruvain, says, no, not yet. In that case, we will write an Igeres Mered for her. Gemara says, why the distinction? So very simple. In the case of the Yavama, we say to her, listen, you don't have a fear of perjury, of procreation. Your brother-in-law doesn't want to marry you, fine, go marry someone else. I think Gemara wants to say the same thing to the Arusa, right? Say to the Arusa, listen, your husband doesn't want to do Nisuin, fine. But if you're not charged with Kriya, go marry someone else. Which the Gemara says, even though a woman is not charged with Kriya, so this is the first wide line, Ella Baba Machmas Taina. She's coming with a claim. What's her claim? She says, I need a staff for my hand and a shovel for my burial. I also seen this concept before. And Allah for myself, even though a woman may not be obligated in a period of Rivya, she has a vested interest in having children. Besides the actualization of fulfillment of an innate maternal instinct, ultimately, again, a woman also wants children. Why? Because children take care of you in your old age. That's the hope in her Dasha. Right? So she says, I need someone to take. In other words, children are my long-term care policy. Right? So the mindset again, I need someone. Right? So therefore, I have a vested interest in getting married and having children. Even though I'm that's the claim. And therefore, in the case of Arusa, Allah for the we will go ahead and write for her a Geras Mered if her husband doesn't want to marry her. So I don't say you can say something about the Shemar Sabbath. But Rachel could say the same thing. I'm ready to do even though I have no mitzvah period. Why? I want to have kids. Why do I want to have kids? Because again, they're my long-term care policy. Which course, Ella idi shetavahu. Rather, I'll say, what's talaha? What's talaha? Idi shetavahu. We're talking about both cases where ultimately, again, he is the one who is making the claim to get married. Hello, Kasha. Allah flows for Kalyadim. Oh, we'll say, let's go back. Remember, how did this whole thing start? This whole thing started because we had a stira, right? We had a contradiction. Ultimately, again, in two sources. First source says that we do not go ahead and write in Igeres Mered, right? We do not write a document of rebellion for a Shomeres Yavam, right? In a Yibam situation. And Bryson Mishnah number 2 said we do. We do. So how do we resolve it? So the Gemara says new resolution. So the Gemara says, Ella idi shetavahu. Both cases are going to say where the man, right, Yavam, in this case of Shimon, is saying to Rachel, let's get married and let's do Yibum, and she is refusing. I will say once again, she's refusing that because she wants to marry him. She's refusing because she wants to cause pain and suffering. The low kasha. So we'll say, how do you reconcile? Listen to this. Kanla floats the kanliyade. Oh, I will say, watch this. One is where he's coming along and saying, I want to do chalitza. I will say, if he wants to do chalitza, well, one is saying that he wants to do chalitza, and the other is saying ultimately again that he wants to do yibum. The Gemara says, the Amar Rabbi Padas Rabbi Yochanan Tavalachotz Niskakilo. When the Yavam wants to do chalitza, that's when that Beis Din intervenes on his behalf. And interestingly enough, if she refuses to do chalitza, we will label her a moredes. Kavaliyame, fascinating, totally counterintuitive. Kavaliyame, if however Shimon, the survivor wants to do yibum, aim this fucking low. We do not go ahead and involve ourselves in this case. So we'll say this is the famous Rabbi Padas from Yivamis. Why is it? I will say that at the end of the day, if he wants to do yibum, we don't get involved in label for our moredes. The law I'm reading is the law. Damrinon lay zil benosav is a sachrisa. You say to Shimon, listen, go marry someone else. Go marry this woman. So the verse is lachlotz nami nemalei zil nosav is sachrisa. I want to say the same thing by chalitza as well. Ella, I will say, here we go. The Amar Kivin da Agida be Lord Kaya, because verse remember again. Even if Rachel refuses to go ahead and do chalitza with Shimon, does that preclude him from getting married to someone else? No, there's no way we're operating with a model. They're technically married more than one wife. So because he has a recalcitrant chalitza, right, at the end of the day, that doesn't damage his ability to, it doesn't impair his ability to get, so he said, go get married to someone else. She doesn't want to do chalitza. Ella, Gamar Kivan Da'agidavi, Lo Kalavali Achisi. Achanami Kivan Da'agidavi, Lo Kalavali Achisi. So also listen to this. It's like this, but it's not true. So she wants to listen. You know what it does to me with the Shaitanim when I have an outstanding Shemaras Yava? Like no one wants to go out with a guy who has an outstanding Shemaras Yava. Which also makes sense. In other words, if you have unresolved Yibum business, that is a relationship red flag. So it makes it say, technically speaking, I can go ahead and marry another woman. It's going to impair me that this relationship is not resolved. You might want to say something over here. Even that here we go. So let's say here we go. Here we go. Both cases, I will say. So therefore, let's go back. Remember, I will say we have a very simple Gemara. We're trying to just resolve. First source said we do not write in Geras Mered for people, for Shemeres Yava. Second source says we do. We're just trying to resolve what that means. Here's the Gemara says you're right. Here we go. We'll say both cases are talking about where Shimon, the surviving brother, tells Rachel, I want to leave him. The Lo Kasha, and the Mishnah Rishona, and the Mishnah Flora. So we'll say again, the two Mishnayos reflect the two different stages of the halacha. We'll say, how so? Listen to this. Here we go. It's not. We'll say, back to Yivam mistakes. We quoted this Rabbi Rothschild so many times. Mitzvahs Yibum Kodemes, the Gemara says this. It's like Mitzvahs Yibum Kodemes, the Mitzvahs Chalitza. Or Rishon L'Shem is Kabin L'Shem of Mitzvah. We'll say in the beginning, so the Mitzvah of Yibum was better than the Mitzvah of Chalitza. Right? Yibum was preferable. Right? Because after all, Yibum is the Mitzvah. Yibum is the Mitzvah. So Rabbi doesn't marry the widow. Why? Because people had the right kavanos when going ahead and performing the Mitzvah of Yibum. Achshov, Shem is Kabin L'Shem Mitzvah. But now, Yibum is preferred that people often don't have right kavanah for mitzvahs. And I will say, by the way, the subtext of this is Rabbi Kudas. What did Rabbi Kudas say? That if a Yavam marries his Yavama, his sister-in-law, for any reason other than the mitzvah, let's say he marries her because he finds her attractive, he marries her because she has money, he marries her because she's a balas chas, whatever it is, any other reason other than the mitzvah, Rabbi Kudas said, you could ask plus. Such a structure also, remember again, so therefore, Akshav, Shem is coming mitzvah, on the mitzvah's chalitza, kodemes the mitzvah's. We'll say now that Allah for myself that people don't do things for the right reasons, learn from you for the right reasons. Ultimately, again, Allah for myself, we say that the mitzvah of chalitza, it's presence of you. The say in the first place, the first Mishnah said that we do not go ahead and write the Geras Mered in the case of Yibum. That's reflecting the later iteration of the halacha. That we don't want people to do Yibum, we actually prefer people to do chalitza. The second source that the Gemara quoted is we write the Geras Mered that was in the original halacha, where ultimately again Yibum was the preferred mechanism of So let's say I think something amazing. Again, Rabbi says like this. So let's say this is fascinating like that. So in the second iteration of this halacha, Chazal essentially said that since a person doesn't have the right kavanos, now temporarily that people don't have kavanah for the mitzvah, therefore what mitzvahs chalitza kodemes. Do chalitza. So the Imre says like this. Let's go see. I'm just going to put this. It's kasha. I understand. The eighth yomar lo kapatz lekafta. Alo be'emes chafetzu. Ela shabbos din monim also. B'nimsa omer sheker. They'll say, listen to this kasha. So let's just play this out. Reuben's married to Rachel. Reuben dies without children. Reuben has a surviving brother. Surviving brother Shimon. Right? Shimon shows up in Beis Din. And what does Shimon say? Shimon says, I want to do Yibum with Rachel. I want to do Yibum with Rachel. What does Beis Din tell him? What does Beis Din tell him? No, what are you doing? What are you going to do? You're going to do Chalitza. You're going to do Chalitza. And Akshav now Beis Din do Chalitza. So let's say, what's the verbiage? What's the wording that's used when a man does Chalitza? Lo chafatzti lekafta. I don't want to take her as a wife. Ask the Imre Emes. Shimon's going to stand in Beis Din and he's going to say, look, God, I don't want to. He just said that's 2 minutes. He wants to marry her. But Beis Din said, no, we're not letting you. How can you say so? How could Shimon say? How can we let Shimon say something that is clearly false? So get ready for this. Get ready for this. Yesh lomar she'akavana hi ala nefesh shehi maskenas l'tigeres ha'avim. And it's like, where can you find my true expression of intent? My true expression of intent is not what I say with my lips, but it's what I want in my soul. And if I say, what does the neshama of the Yid want? The neshama of the Yid only wants one thing, which is to do the right thing and to live in conformance with Allah. And in this case, Allah tells Shimon, you have to go ahead and do chalitza and not evil. He goes on, he says, so again, therefore says the Imam MS so beautifully that when he says lo chafakti l'chafta, I will say, this is my real faith. If you ask me, what do I really want in life? The truth is, what I really want is what my neshama wants. Now, that doesn't mean that that's always the way I behave, and that's always the way I act, and those are always the things I go after. But if you ask me at a core level, what do I want out of life? I want the things that are going to make my neshama. I want the things that are going to make my neshama feel fulfilled. That's what I want. And therefore, even though Shimon just said, I want to marry Rachel, no, you don't. No, that's what your lips are saying. But your neshama is saying, I want to do whatever is in conformance with halacha because I want to live my life in total compliance with the Ratzon Habori, with the will of Hashem. That's the desire of a Jew. He goes on and he quotes the Rambam over here, who says, this is a beautiful Rambam, every single Jew wants to do the mitzvahs and wants to distance himself from Averis. Hello? Sheyitzro Tokfo. Sometimes my Yitzhak hijacks the bus, right? Yitzhak hijacks everything. The idea goes on. So we'll say, isn't that a beautiful idea? So, even though Shimon himself just said, I want to marry her, it's not a contradiction to say, lo chafasi l'chafta. Because at the end of the day, what I really want out of life is what my neshama wants. So beautiful. Gemara goes like that. So I must say a perfect. So again, remember, now let's get into the amount of diminution. Remember again, I will say we had a Mishnah said that Allah two opinions in the Mishnah. First opinion in the Mishnah, so Yehuda said Tanakama said 7 dinar in a week. Rabbi Yehuda says 7 trapikim. It says the Gemara, let's analyze. So the Gemara says, my trapikim, what are trapikim? Or Sheshes? Astira. Great, very helpful. What's an Astira? My Astira? How good is the half of Zuz? I know, I'll get Yehuda. Omer Shlosha trapikim, Shein Tesha Mea, Shein Tesha Ma'im, Mea Bechatzi L'Poyom. So let's say Yehuda says, it's ultimately again 3 trapikim that are 9 ma'im, 1.5 ma'ah per day. That's the amount the Mishnah comes out. I'm literally here by Yosef and Shmuel. My Shmuel Ihu, even late the Shabbos. My Shmuel Ihu late the Shabbos. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. If you notice, by the way, the diminution amounts and the addition amounts are not the same. Right? Ultimately, it seems to be more is diminished than is added. So I understand if Morid and Moredas are the same, then why are the values different? So once if you do the math, essentially what the Gemara says is pretty much we add onto the ksuva at a rate of 6 days a week. We diminish on the ksuva at a rate of 7 days a week. So why is it that the diminution, Shabbos is not included in the diminution? Sorry, Shabbos is included in the diminution, but is not included in the addition. The Gemara is very simple. If you can map this kapach from Mexico Shabbos, as I will say by her, by we're diminishing the ksuva, even if we diminish the portion on Shabbos, it doesn't look like there's any Shabbos wages being incurred. Ihu, Gasufi Kamasufi of the days, Mexico is Shabbos. I will say this is very interesting, but he ultimately again, so ultimately again, but he ultimately again we add on. Sorry, when he's the morid, then we add on to the ksuva. Ultimately, that looks like schar Shabbos. So we'll say it's actually very interesting. The concern is, since the way we penalize him when he is a morid is that we add on to the ksuva, if there is a Shabbos allocation amount, it looks like schar Shabbos. It's the Shabbos earnings, and that accounts for the differential. I'm going to appear by Yosef and Shmuel, not being more than Moredes. So we'll say ultimately, so now we'll say that's an interesting question. Why is there a distinction in the amounts? And as I will say, at the end of the day, we said that halachically, ultimately again, a mored and a moredes are the same. In other words, whether it's the man who rebels against his wife or the wife who rebels against her husband, ultimately, again, the involvement in Allah and the penalty is significant, the financial penalty is not. So how do you account for the discrepancy? So I'll say, so of course, I want to point out, the Gemara just answered, well, one of the discrepancies is Shabbos, right? Diminution versus addition. I will say that's very easily resolvable. How is it easily resolvable? Just go ahead and add more, right? His addition during the week. In other words, so obviously, Chazal felt that there should be a difference in the amount. Why is there a difference in the amount? Say Ulaman Meshuk Shazonos. I'll say this is incredible. Go out and learn from the red light district, right? From the harlot marketplace. Me socher es me. Who hires who? So I'll say the reality is, apparently, clinical tests have shown that there are many more men that hire women than women who hire men, which indicates, the Gemara says, that men have a much greater need for ongoing intimacy from women. And therefore, again, the withholding of intimacy from the marriage is much more detrimental or painful for the man. Furthermore, the Gemara says, Davar Acher, Zeh Yitzro Mibachutz, Zeh Yitzro Mibachutz. The Gemara says, furthermore, even if a woman is desirous, so ultimately, again, her desire is something internally. If a man becomes desirous, ultimately, again, he can have a physical reaction of arousal, and that can be embarrassing for him. Ultimately, again, if he doesn't have a way to satisfy that desire. So this is such a important thing. So you want to understand over here that halacha l'maisa, there's a difference. There's a difference for men and for women with their need for ongoing intimacy. So because for the case of the man, the case of Meredex is something that's, we'll call it just more painful and more uncomfortable for him on an ongoing basis. Therefore, again, the amount that is deducted from the ksuba is greater than the amount that is added to the ksuba. Look, very interesting. Says the Mishnah, and nothing additional. So the Mishnah says as follows: Hamashras ishta ayidei shlish. So also here we go. Another interesting case. This case are fascinating. A man supports his wife through a third party. How exactly is that one? Look what the Mishnah says. Hamashras ishta ayidei shlish. Rashi says, Shenosin lamazal base apotropis ve'im mispel gelas. So listen, here's the case. The case. Reuben is married to Rachel. Rachel lives in a separate house. And Rachel is therefore supported, and Reuben puts money with an apotropis, with someone who's responsible for Rachel's support. So she lives in a house, and again, he's fully supporting her, but they're living separately. So that's how much is. So I'll say, how much do you have to support her with? How much do you have to support? It's quite interesting. So the Gemara says, I will say that it was something. Well, just on the concept of Yitzro Mibachutz versus Yitzro Mibachnim is a very profound yesod as well. When the Gemara says that a man Yitzro Mibachutz, I want to say there's such a think about those words that applies to each of us, right? So again, the Yitzro is Mibachutz. Those are the most beautiful words in the world. Why? Because let's see what that tells you. Sometimes we think that the negative things we want, the negative things we do, are parts of who we are. But it's not true. It's from Mibachutz. But let's say at the end of the day, who I am, one of who I am, like we just said before, I did Imre Anas. Who am I? I'm an Hashem. I'm an Hashem, and I want to do the right things. And sometimes I have a Yetzer that there is. That Yetzer is not me. That Yetzer is not me. That Yetzer is Mibachutz. That Yetzer is outside of me. Yet there's a lot of control over me, and it derails a lot of stuff in life, but it is not part and parcel of who I am. Yitzri Mibachutz. My Yetzer is on the outside. Okay, but we don't have to get into this over there. Says the Gemara. So we'll say, how much support? We'll say, well, just hold on to that forever, because there's nothing more profound. Sometimes the reason we don't do tshuva is because we just feel like we're such damaged goods. And Chazal tell us, not damaged, perfect. I have the Zara. That's fine. That's not you. That's Yitzro Mibachutz. So how much support do you have to give? It says the Gemara, if you close off, you can't give less than 2 kav of wheat, or 4 kav in soil, or 4 kav of barley. Rabbi Yossi, don't pass across soil, or Rabbi Shosha yourself the Edo. So let's say Rabbi Yossi says, no one talk about barley except Rabbi Shmuel, who live next to Edo. What that means, we'll see in the Gemara. But no say law, chatzi kav kitnis, you have to give her a half of kav of legumes, the chatzi with shem and a half of oil, the kav grogos, a kav of dried figs, or one of vela, or one of pressed figs. So we'll say, what happens if he doesn't have these items? So you have to give her produce or goods of like quality and quantity. Good. The idea over here is the Mishnah will say you have to understand like this is such a profound idea in securing the rights of the woman. So remember again, when the Mishnah is perfect, the woman had security in one of two ways: she was married or she was in her father's home. Here, what the Mishnah is spelling out is explicitly that a husband has to support his wife with all of these items. And by spelling it out, so let's say if I'm just saying support could be very what's the word? Subjective. Subjective. By spelling this out, it's objective metrics of support. So we know mapats machatzalas. He keeps her bed. When I say mapats is a soft mat, machatzalas is a harder mat. Benosim akipa l'rosha. He has to give her a little bit of for her head. A tefel or sheitel, right? He has to give her a tefel or a sheitel. The chagam is not a belt. Umina alami moi l'moi. And I will say you have to buy her shoes. How often is a husband obligated to buy his wife shoes? Moed l'moi. When I say take care of something, umina alami moi. You just need to get new shoes for the 3 regalim. I would not flip this way, right? This is not gonna. And if you do, I'm just quoting the Mishnah. I'm not espousing an opinion. I was saying, the kelim sefamishin is yours mishana l'shana. Furthermore, you have to buy new clothing once a year. Wow. New clothing once a year. I was saying that new clothing should be substantive clothing that's worth 56. There ain't no sin law. No chadashim must have. So you don't give a woman new clothing during the summer. New clothing is thicker. So you don't give her new clothing during the summer because ultimately, again, that's going to be dry. No shkakim must have yishanim. Nor do you give her worn out clothing during the rainy season. And no sin law kelim shacham. Listen to this. Here's how clothing is spoken times in Mishnah. And no sin law kelim shachamishim zuz must have yishanim. I'll say a husband is obligated to buy his wife new clothing during the winter. And good like substantive clothing, right? 50 zuz clothing. So you give her 50 zuz clothing during the winter. The Wisconsin law, same law, will say that that's the clothing she wears through the summer. Just the difference is by the time she gets to the summer, it's already worn out, it's already broken in enough that you consider it to be thin clothing. Kind of a bashchakum shalom. And if I say worn out clothing, let's say again the next season when she gets new clothing, she gets to keep the worn out clothing for herself. No sin of na'ah kesef itself. Furthermore, again, it's obligated to give her a na'ah of money for her needs, each and every week. And they'll say, even if the husband or for some reason not living together during the week, ultimately, again, he must keep with her on Shabbos. Right? In other words, he must be with her last once a week. Ain't no sin of na'ah kesef itself. If he doesn't give her ultimately, again, the what's the word? There's a word for it. Petty cash, right? Petty cash, right? Doesn't give her just the need for just money around the house. Ultimately, again, then she keeps her earnings. Umahi also, she won't say. So again, we reference this idea about a wife being working the home. So what's the work? What's the work that she's obligated to do? So the Gemara says, so Mahi also, Mishkal Pamish Sloim Shesi B'Yehuda. She does 5 sloim worth of worked bread in Yehuda. She Eser Sloim the Gadol. That's ultimately 10 sloim in the Gadol. Oh. Mishkal Eser Sloim Arev Yehuda, or the work or the wage of 10 sloim of left bread in Yehuda. She Eser Sloim the Gadol. Fine, the Maisa Miniga, and if she was nursing, we diminish the amount of earnings she has to bring in. And we add on to the amount of food that the husband is obligated to give her. When I say when it's all of this, so should be Israel. When I say this is only true, these are the floor amounts. Everything mentioned in Mishnah is a floor, is a minimum. However, about the chubad, a kolafi kavodo. I will say by the chubad, someone who has money, ultimately again, I will say this goes back to the kushta, right? The Avinu Gemara was the kushta, right? About say the kushta, support and comfort. If there is money, ultimately again, a husband is obligated to support his wife in accordance with the wealth and the needs he has at his disposal. We'll stop here. And all of this is except clothing and shoes. Except clothing and shoes. Alright, so everyone, have a great day, everyone. Good to see everyone. Ringo, Richard, Michael. All right, let's say good morning. Let us begin first time with Chodesh. Begin by thanking our sponsors for share today. Thank Ira and Grossman for dedicating the share. Dedicating the week of their emotion. The at the same time, Ira's mother, Freda Grossman, Freda Bas Schmidt, those who own the Raphael from the Men's Bank Havahora, Shamo Havanalia, and the family of Bet. If you have had a Havahora sponsor for the month of Av, all right, so with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Chaf Gimel 23. We are picking up on Chaf days in the days. We have a lot to do today. So we're actually just gonna jump back just a little bit. I want to be careful with to jump back all that much. Let's see how much we left off with. Now let's pick up with once again Amr of Yochanan, which is 14 lines down from the top. Amr of Yochanan. Very quickly, we did this case yesterday. Shneim Omer Mace, Shneim Omer no Mace. To say the husband died, to say he didn't die. Harayza no Tibasay. The only says okay, she shouldn't be married, but if she did be married, she does not have to leave the second husband. Shneim Omer Miskarsha, Shneim Omer Miskarsha. Two witnesses say that she was divorced, two witnesses say she wasn't divorced. Harayza no Tibasay. She does not have, she should not remarry. The enemy says states it. And if she does remarry, then halacha l'maisa she should be husband number two. So this is where we left off. I asked the Gemara, Maishka Reishna, Maishka Seifa. They will say, now both of these cases seem to be the same, right? They're the same case. What's the same case? They're both cases of what? 2 versus 2. In case 1, 2 witnesses say that her husband died, 2 witnesses say that her husband didn't die. In that case, the halacha is she shouldn't get remarried, but if she does, she doesn't have to be husband number 2. Case number 2, 2 witnesses say she got divorced, 2 witnesses say she didn't get divorced, she shouldn't get remarried, but in that case, if she does have to leave husband number 2. So asks the Gemara why the difference between the 2 cases. I'm not Abaye says, oh, interesting. Abaye says, how do you set up the case? We're not talking about a case of 2 versus 2, but rather what? We're talking about a situation of an 8 effort. And therefore, it says, listen to this. 8 effort on the mace, in the Rabbanic betray, so we'll say, now we makes sense. Remember again, when an 8 effort, then that's how you run stays. When an 8 effort says that the husband died, ultimately, again, he is believed. Not only is he believed, but an 8 effort in the realm of saying that a husband died has the power of 280. Whenever the Torah believes in 8 effort, and 8 effort has the power of 2 witnesses. And therefore, watch this on our side. Listen to this. The Gemara says like this. In fact, the way the case is Zabayim, the way the case is going to work out is like this. It's really an 8 effort comes along and says, husband died. Rachel, your husband Ruvain died. Okay? What happens when an 8 effort comes along and says that a husband died? What's the halacha? He's believed. And he's treated as if he is 2 witnesses. So then what happens? Then another 8 comes along and says, no, Ruvain didn't die. So I say, interestingly enough, how do we view that second 8 echad? That second 8 echad, exactly as that, as an 8 echad. And so it turns out that halacha l'maisa, it should be an 8 echad against, so to speak, 2 witnesses. That's the case. The Gemara says, if that's the case, then why don't we allow? Remember again, what did the Brisa say? She shouldn't get remarried. But in that case, if she did get remarried, we wouldn't make her lose the second husband. But if it's as you just set up, then halacha. So why can't she get married lechatchila? This is incredible. Shouldn't Rabbi ask Rabbi Yasi, Haser mincha at shuspa, the Lord Literally, again, remove from yourself the crookedness of the mouth, the lazus spasayin, the slander of the lips, move away from yourself. And this, so what's interesting about this case is like this. Gemara says this, right, more correctly, and the way we just set it up with Rabbayim, you should be able to get out of the Katchila. But here's the issue. You have opposing testimony. You do have opposing testimony. And as much as that opposing testimony, halacha l'maisa, is not necessarily halachically relevant, we do take it into account. So the Chatzim will tell you, you know what? Don't get married until we go ahead and we clarify this a little bit. But if she did, ex post facto, ultimately again she doesn't have to leave. Rabbi said, now you understand the distinction between the case of where you have Eidos when he died versus Eidos when she was divorced. Right there, another example, another review. Rabbi Amar, the Olam Trey. Rabbi says, at the end of the day, thank you, I'm sorry. Seifa, Eid Echad Omer Niskarsha, the Eid Echad Omer Niskarsha, here it is, what I say. Seifa, the second case of the Brisa, where you have an Eid Echad saying, right, first Eid says she got divorced, second Eid says she got divorced, so Tarvayu Be'eshes Ish Kamasagi, I will say, interestingly enough, they are both testifying about a woman who is married. So the only shaila is she still married or is she no longer married? The Haidu comment is Gershon, the one who said that she was divorced. Havi Lechad, the Dvar Shel Echad B'Makom Shnayim. So I will say, this is what's interesting. In that case, it's such a fascinating question. When the Eidim are arguing, is she divorced, is she not divorced? What are they both agree on? What do they both agree on? That she was an Eishes Ish. So you have two witnesses certifying the fact that she was an Eishes Ish, and now an Eid Echad saying that she was divorced. Okay, so I'll say, so what does that leave you with? That leaves you with an Eishes Ish. And therefore, again, she has no right to get married. And even the evidence, if she does get married, we would make her leave second husband. Incredible. Rabbi says, the Olam trading. Rabbi says, I don't like that. I don't like that. The point is, as the Brisa says, it's two witnesses versus two witnesses. Rabbi Rothschild, Rabbi Yossi, Begerishin, below Rabbi Misa, and ultimately, again, Rabbi Yochanan accepted the position of Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi, where Rabbi Yossi was quoted in yesterday's daf. What he has, you have made the distinction between when she remarries before the witnesses or after the witnesses. And he agreed with Rabbi Bar Yossi in the case of divorce, not in the case of death. My time, I watched the reason very simply. Misein Yechola Mechashto. In the case of death, ultimately, again, she cannot contradict the husband, so to speak. However, in the case of Gerushin, she can. But will a woman go ahead and contradict her husband regarding divorce? What does that mean? We'll say this is the position of Hamuna, which is going to come up a couple of times throughout this daf, which is incredible. But Hamuna says a woman would never be so brazen to tell her husband that he divorced her. Well, see differently. A woman would never be so brazen to say to her husband in his presence that he divorced her if he had in fact not divorced her. Which will say there's a logic. In other words, to tell your spouse, oh yeah, you divorced me, when you know that's not true, that level of craziness a person does not exhibit. And therefore, again, Allah myself, a woman does tell her husband that you divorced me, we put in front of which wants how to mediate about the Eidah become a Saile. When is that true? That's when there's no Eidos. And that's when she's not bolstered by Eidim. However, again, the Gemara says, however, about Heicha V'ika Eidah become a Saile, Iza. They will say when she does have supporting testimony, when Einach Minami, she would be tempted to lie. And even a bold-faced lie in the presence of her husband, because at the end of the day, halacha l'maisa, she has testimony, she has witnesses to back her up. Ravasi says, "Kigom the army Eidim Achshav Meis Achshav Gershon." Ravasi has a different interpretation of Raisa. What's the case of Raisa? The Eidim come along and say their Eidos is right now your husband just died, right now your husband just divorced her. So now watch this. Risa Lekal of Ruda. So in the case of death, presumably the Eidim are saying the husband died at some faraway location that they cannot presently corroborate. However, Gerushin Ikal of Borora. In the case of Gerushin, the Edom are claiming, Rachel, your husband Ruben just divorced you now. That should be clarified. After you clarify, the Amina law, if you said the Hafi Hava, Asi like you gave. Your husband just divorced you. Show us your get. Show us your get. Good. So again, all of this, three different interpretations, all really focused on the same idea, which is Halacha l'maaseh of Brisa. The Brisa says, again, seems to set up two parallel cases. Right? Two Eidim versus two Eidim. First case is a case of death. Second case is a case of Gerushin. In the case of death, she shouldn't get remarried with Yevet. If she did, she doesn't have to leave her second husband. In the second case, the case of divorce, she shouldn't get remarried. If she did, she does have to leave her second husband. And all the Gemara was just giving was different interpretations as to how we make a chilik, how we make a distinction between death and divorce. Beautiful. Interesting case. Two witnesses say, Rachel, you are Mikudeshes, right? You're in Iskacha. You had Kiddushin with Ruvain. And two witnesses say she did not have Kiddushin. What's the halacha? Hareizu lo tinase. She should not get married. She should not get married. The Nises locates. I will say, you should not get married to someone else. Right? She should not get married to someone else. Right? Hareizu by tinase. The Nises locates. But ultimately, again, if she did, she doesn't have to leave. She doesn't have to leave her husband. Shtaim only Niskasha, Shtaim alone Niskasha. They're a parallel case. Two witnesses say, Rachel, you got divorced from Ruvain. Two witnesses say, Rachel, you didn't get divorced from Ruvain. Hareza lo tinase. She should not get remarried. The Nises Teitse. But in that case, she should go ahead and leave second husband. Leave second husband. Okay? So I say, let's analyze. Top of Chapkibo. So we're stuck with the same problem. So the same problem. Again, we'll say two cases. Case number one, two witnesses say, Rachel, you had Kiddushin with Ruvain. Two witnesses say, Rachel, you didn't have Kiddushin with Ruvain. What's the halacha there? She should not marry someone else, but if she did, what's the halacha? She doesn't have to leave husband. She doesn't have to leave. We'll call him husband number two. We'll call him Shimon. Right? Case number two, Rachel, you did get divorced from Ruvain. Two witnesses, Rachel, you didn't get divorced from Ruvain. She should not marry someone else, but if she did, what's the halacha? She has to leave that second husband. So I asked the Gemara, why do you distinguish between these cases? Interesting. Abaye says, what's the case? It's one witness who is testifying. So the Gemara says, listen to this. This great sake. So listen to this. Abaye says, no, it's not cases of two witnesses versus two witnesses, but rather what is it? It's one witness. They will say, now watch this. Here's the case. One witness comes along and says, Rachel, you received Kiddushin from Ruvain. One witness says that what? No, you didn't. They will say, what did both witnesses agree on? What do they both agree on? That she was single. Right? Interesting. So they both agree on was that she was single, that there was a previously established state of singlekeit. Right? So she was single. Now we'll say, so now what happens? An Eid Echad comes along and says that she received Kiddushin. Okay? So we'll say, what's the status of an Eid Echad in the face of two witnesses who said that she was single? Meaningless. And therefore, again, although we would tell her the Chatila don't get remarried until we figure this out, with the evidence if she did, we would not make her leave her husband. However, Seifa, the most in the Seifa case, one witness says that she was divorced, one witness says that she wasn't divorced. So we'll say in this case, what's the halacha? Tarvayu be'eishes ish kamisadi. We'll say, what do the two witnesses agree on? What do they agree on? She was married. So you have two witnesses saying that she was an Eishes Ish, and therefore what? I have one witness saying that she was divorced, and therefore one witness does not carry any weight in the face of two, and therefore her status is an Eishes Ish, and therefore even if she remarries, we make her leave husband number two. Incredible. What's it? Incredible. That's Abaye. Next. The Vasher Rav says, no, I don't like it. The Olam, Trey. In reality, it's two witnesses versus two witnesses. The Eifa. And I think you have to go ahead and actually switch to halachas. Meaning what? Shnayim, here we go. Shnayim omen ra'inu hashinis katsha, u'shnayim omen lo ra'inu hashinis katsha, harezu lo tinase. So this is interesting. Rashi has a different nuance. What's the case? Two witnesses say, Rachel, we saw you receive kiddushin from Reuben. And two witnesses say, Rachel, we did not see you receive kiddushin from Reuben. What's the halacha? Harezu lo tinase. Ideally, she shouldn't get remarried, or she shouldn't get married to another person. To clarify this, then he says teitze. But if she did get remarried, she has to leave husband number two. So Gemara says, Shita, and I both said, understand it. Listen to the different claims over here. Two witnesses say, Rachel, we saw you receive kiddushin from Reuben. You're a married woman. What do the other two witnesses say? We didn't see anything. So the Gemara says, Pshita, lo ra'inu ina rai. They will say, saying you didn't see something is not avis. Right? They will say, imagine, two witnesses show up amazing. So Reuben killed Shimon. The other two witnesses show up and say, well, we didn't see anything. Okay. Yeah, right. You didn't see anything. Most of the world didn't say that's not avis. So if I will say, if that's how you're setting up this case, then essentially really all you have is what? One set of witnesses, right? Two witnesses. And those two witnesses say that what? That Rachel received kiddushin from Reuben. So now if Rachel goes and receives kiddushin from Shimon, of course she has to leave Shimon. I will say this is incredible. Here we go. The Dari b'chatzor echad. No. The Eidim who say we didn't see anything, they live in the same chutzner, in the same courtyard as Rachel and Reuben, or one of the parties, I should say at least. Listen to this. Well, then, you would have felt like this. If Rachel really was Mukadeshas to Reuben, they would have heard of Kala Isla. Kala Isla means what? People hear about it. They would have Kanye, Mavar, some streamers on the door, whatever it is. The nice, the big Mazel Tov sign. People have kiddushin. There's a call. And the fact that they lived in the same culture, they never heard about this. It must be that what? So in other words, that's what it means. When they even show up and they say, we didn't see Rachel receive kiddushin from Reuben, what they're saying is we live in the same culture as these people. And if something would have happened, we would have heard about it. Amashmalon, the of the Ushi, the Mekadshi Bitsina. So what do you see from here? You see from here that there are people who do kiddushin quietly. Right? There are people ultimately, again, who go ahead and affect kiddushin in a bitzina quietly, and therefore just because you didn't hear about it doesn't mean anything. Seifa, let's look at the end of the right. So Seifa, Shnaim Omen Ra'inu Hashin is Garsha, Shnaim Omen Lo Ra'inu Hashin is Garsha. That was about the second case. This is Rav Ashi's approach. Rav Ashi says, right, two witnesses say we saw her get divorced, and two witnesses say we did not see her get divorced. What's the halacha? Harezu lo tinase. Ultimately, she shouldn't get remarried. Then we say no dates. I will say again, Rav Ashi switches it. In this case, if she did get remarried, she doesn't have to leave husband number two. Now, most of the Gemara says that's pshita, right? So we'll say. So remember again. Once again, so effectively, what do you have? You have two witnesses saying we saw Reuben give Rachel a get. Two witnesses saying, what do they say? We didn't see anything. So the Gemara says, of course, she's divorced. All you have over here really is ages saying that Rachel is divorced, and she has a get. So of course, if she got remarried, she doesn't have to leave her second husband. Here we go. Maybe it's the same. Maybe it's what we said before. That maybe the witnesses live in the same. The witnesses who say we didn't see anything live in the same courtyard as Rachel and Reuben. So they say like this: had there been a get, we would have seen it, or we would have heard about it. The fact that we didn't hear about it means it didn't happen. So the Gemara says, that's the same thing as the previous case on the right side. You don't feel like this. Maybe by kiddushin, sometimes it can happen that people do kiddushin under the radar. About gabi gerushin, he said the egarsha kala ista. They will say, but by gerushin, no one gets divorced under the radar. They will say, in fact, again, the whole notion of divorce is designed to create a certain element of publicity. So people know that this couple is no longer married. So therefore, if you're living in the same culture as this couple and you don't hear anything, maybe that testifies to the fact that they're not really divorced. Here the Gemara says, Kamash Malon, Da'abidi Inchi Dimakachi, Udimagarshi, Bitsina. Kamash Malon say, no, that's not nice people get divorced. No, you do quietly. It's nice even people get divorced quietly as well. And therefore, again, not seeing something, even if you live in direct proximity to the parties, is not iraya that it didn't occur. Pretty parallel. I'll also tell you, if you go back a couple of lines, I was very taken by this line. The Rav actually sets this up, and the lashon of the Gemara was, "B'dari b'chatzar echad." You know, sometimes you live in proximity to a person, and so if you live in proximity to a person, what do you think? Right? If this person was really special, diniskacha. This person had kedusha in him. Kala is I know that. Right? I know this person. Right? And also you can fill in the blank, right? If you're referring to one's spouse, if you're referring to one's child, if you're referring to one's friend, I know this person. And the truth is, they're totally unremarkable. Nothing special about them. Maraya, if there wasn't something special about them, I would know it. If there was kedusha in them, I would know it because I'm in constant proximity to them. To which the Gemara says, Kamash Malon, the Avdi Inshi Dimakachi Bitsina. They will say, meaning what? There are people who amass kedusha privately. Some people you can see their kedusha on their sleeve. I don't mean in an arrogant way, but some people at the end of the day, you could see that they're hated. You could see that they're special. You could see that they're remarkable. And I will say, some people in this world, they look totally unremarkable. And even worse, they look like they're void of kedusha. And sometimes we think that we can size people up because, hey, I see this person every day. I know them. I've known them for years. I live in proximity to them. Like, I live in the same chutzner. And if they had kedusha, I would know it. Because they have nothing. Kamash Malon, the Gemara says, the of the Inchi Dimakachi Bitsina. They will say every single Jew has kedusha. Every single Jew has kedusha. Some people have kedusha b'parhesia, the kind of kedusha you can see, and some people have kedusha b'tzira, the type of kedusha ultimately again that's private. But the kedusha is always there. And listen, what a gift the Gemara gives us on Rosh Chodesh Av. Where our entire avodah over these 9 days is to work on our being Adam L'Chavera. The key to successful being Adam L'Chavera, interpersonal relationships, is the ability to, if you can't see the Kedusha in your fellow Jew, you have to at least believe that it's there. You know, sometimes I try to see something good in someone and I just can't find it. I'm really looking hard. I can't see any level of Kedusha in a particular person. Even if you can't see it, you have to believe that it's there. How do you know? Again, Ksulas Dafkaf Gimel Amidalef. Kamash Malon, the Abdi Inshi Dimakachi Bitsina. Some people have their Kedusha, and it's private. So private that no one else could see it. So private that no one else even knows about it. But you have to believe that within every Jew it exists. The Gemara goes right there. The Gemara says, Sheni says, well, remember again, the end of the Mishnah was, if ultimately, again, when she gets remarried, Eidim comes, she doesn't have to leave second husband. So the Gemara says, Moshe Masnilare, Sharabba Bar Abid Masnila Sepa. So what's in this Machlokes? Remember again, when we saw this Mishnah yesterday, it was Machlokes, does this statement go on the Reisha or on the Sefa? So we'll say, so again, ultimately, remember again, the Reisha was to talking about the case for Halacha Lamaisa again. She says, I wasn't Ish, but then I got divorced. The Sefa was, I was taken captive, but I wasn't violated. So the Gemara said, listen to this. So Man Demasnila, so the one who goes ahead and attributes this line to the Reish will certainly say what's on the Sefer. Because we'll say in general, as we're going to see in cases of captivity, Chazal or Meko. But the one who goes ahead and sets it up on the Sefer will say first white line from Kimel or Aleph. Aval Areisha lo will not necessarily set it up on the Reisha because the Maisi can also remember again. The Reisha is talking about it. Also remember the case of Reisha was a woman comes to Beis Din. She says, I was married, but now I'm divorced. Again, Pesha will do. Right? So Seifa, I was taken captive, but I wasn't violated. To which the Gemara said, Lema, so I say maybe they really arguing Rav Hamuna. Also, remember again, Rav Hamuna, I remember we mentioned the part of the face of the beach just a little while ago. Rav Hamuna holds that in general, a woman would never be so brazen to say to her husband, divorce me, right to his face, if she was not in fact divorced. So the Gemara says, the man the one who goes in and sets up this line of the Mishnah referring to the Risha holds like Rav Hamuna, Uman the Masila Sefer Masay Rav Hamuna. No, the Gemara says, no, not true. Fully Alma is in Rav Hamuna. We'll say everyone agrees to the principle of Rav Hamuna. That ultimately, again, Ein Isha, Chazaka Ein Isha Me'iza Hanebech Nebayla. We'll say everyone agrees that a woman would never be so brazen to claim that her husband divorced her in the presence of her husband, if that in fact did not occur. So what are they arguing about? The Mara Sabar Ki Itmar Rav Hamuna Befarav, Aval Shalom Befarav Me'iza, the Mara Sabar Shalom Befarav Nami Ein Me'iza. So we'll say it's actually very interesting. There's Machlokes of Rav Hamuna. Is Rav Hamuna's statement just applied just in the presence of the husband? That we say that like this: a woman would never claim, when standing opposite her husband, she would never claim that he divorced her if he did not divorce her. Does that chazaka only apply when she's in the presence of her husband? But if she's not in his presence, she would lie about it? I don't know. Even if she's not in his presence, a woman would never make that claim that she is divorced when she's in fact not divorced. That's the source of the Machlokes. So the Gemara goes like that. Bimi Sheni says Baal Eivin. Amar Shmuel, Amar Abu Shmuel. What did he say? Mamish. So I say, now listen to this. So remember again, we're focusing still on the last line of the Mishnah. The last line of the Mishnah was, Bimi Sheni says Baal Eivin. If after she got remarried, Eivin came, she does not have to leave second husband. The Lord said, watch this. Comes along Avoid the Shmuel, and he says like this. No nises mamish. It doesn't literally mean if she got remarried. Rather, Allah, even shetiru and the nose, afa pisha lo nises. The Lord say, watch this. This is groundbreaking. This is what he says. Abu Lushma says like this. Understand the future like this. In any of the aforementioned cases, once a woman has received a heter to remarry, then halacha l'maisa, that heter remains intact, even if Eivin come. Well. So I'll just give you a simple application of this. A woman says that halacha l'maisa again, I was married, but now I'm divorced. What's halacha in such a situation? What's halacha? Right? She can go ahead and get remarried. But let's say now, so basically possible. Now let's say Eidim show up. And Eidim say that what? Rachel's married. Yeah, that's all they say. Rachel's married. So we'll say, so what's the halacha in this case? Essentially, what the Shmuel is saying is, once Beis Din Paskin essentially and gave her a license to get remarried, even if the witnesses showed up before she got remarried, her original heter remains intact. Incredible. So it says the Gemara, lo teitze katani. Well, 1 second, that's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says that ultimately, again, if she got remarried before the witnesses came, in lo teitze, which sounds like she actually got remarried and telling her she doesn't have to leave her second husband. To which he says, no, lo teitze mehetera harisha. Wow. What it means is she doesn't have to leave her heter. In other words, once we operate with that hit there, Beis Din gave her a license to get remarried. Okay. In other words, even though witnesses now come before she got remarried, she does not leave her heter. Incredible. Tanrabana, supposed to back this up. So the woman says the following: I was taken captive, but I wasn't violated by my captors. And by the way, I also happen to have Eidim that I am Tehorah. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Ein omrim namtin ad sheyaviu Eidim. We don't say, okay, bring your witnesses. Ela matirin osam miyad. Rather, we allow her to get remarried immediately. We'll say, why? In other words, we'll say, what is this saying? Here, this woman comes before us. Right? She says, I was taken captive, but I wasn't violated. And I also happen to have witnesses to attest to my purity. So I will say, so remember, I have two things happening over here. Based on what she said, can we permit her to go ahead and marry a Kohen? Because that's what's happening over here. Can we permit her to marry a Kohen? The answer is yes. Why? You might have thought for 1 second. She's saying she has Eidim. So maybe we shouldn't rely on Pesha Asa Pesha here. Let's wait for the Eidim. Kamash Malam, no. If witnesses are in front of us, we'll utilize witnesses. But if they're not here, Pesha Asa Pesha here. So let's say, now watch this. Let's say we permitted to get married based on Pesha Asa Pesha here. And now what happens? Witnesses come, and the witnesses say, witnesses say, I don't know. Right? So she claims Reuben and Shimon know that I wasn't violated. Reuben and Shimon roll into town.